He went on Bill Maher and kind of trampled over Bill because Bill wasn't prepared for that interview. Shame on Bill. And now he's got a new video, one of which that the president actually pinned to his Twitter feed, defending Trump and his administration's response to coronavirus. So let's go through it. And let's start with this. I want you to see this first, and then we'll go through his video. This is from ABC News back in November. Concerns about what is known to be the most novel coronavirus pandemic were detailed in November intelligence report by the military's National Center for Medical Intelligence, according to two officials familiar with the document's contents. The report was the result of an analysis of wire and computer intercepts coupled with satellite images. It raised alarms about an out-of-control disease would pose a serious threat to the U.S. forces in Asia, forces that depended on the NCMI's work, and it paints a picture of an American government that could have ramped up mitigation and containment efforts far earlier to prepare for a crisis posed to come home. Analysts concluded it could be a cataclysmic event. Are we to believe the president was not briefed and was unaware of this? Is that what Dan is telling us? Are we to believe that the president didn't know about such information? I find that very hard to believe.
Really over-the-top accusations against the president, that he's got blood on his hands, that his denial and delay has cost lives, and that basically he took no action until it was too late. The question is any of this true? Let's start back in January. January 15th, the first patient with coronavirus enters the United States from Wuhan. That was also the same day that these impeachment pens were being handed out. But
gotta jump in already. Dan's hitting us with the truth. Is he telling us that the president is not capable of handling two things at the same time? He's not capable of, which he's not even handling because he's not doing anything in the impeachment process. He's just sitting back. But he's such little of a man that if impeachment pens are being handed out, he can't handle another crisis that could potentially impact the United States. Is that what Dan wants us to believe? This is already starting out in a completely one-sided way, as you can see with the pens, the impeachment pens.
Luckily, the administration was on top of it. A couple of days later, January 17th, they were already implementing screenings at San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York airports for flights coming in from Wuhan. But still, even about a week later, our mainstream media was still promoting things like this. Doctors saying, hey, this isn't a big deal.
Let's come back in here. Don't be fooled by the whole screening thing, right? Don't be fooled by it. Screening is just a way that they were asking about symptoms of travelers who may have traveled to China or other nations and maybe took your temperature. What is that? That's not doing anything. I'm sure there were people who were asymptomatic and people who had the virus, or people who they checked and their symptoms were fine. Or maybe they had symptoms, but they were symptoms of something that you could just chalk up as maybe the flu or a bad cold. So don't be fooled by that. Second, he says a week later or so, was when we know the Senate Intelligence Committee had briefings on coronavirus, because on January 24th was when Republican Senator from Georgia, I believe, Kelly Loeffler, sold all her stocks. So they knew about it. So maybe the media, maybe Vox and Health and the Los Angeles Times, the headlines he shows you, maybe they were unaware, but our congressmen and senators were aware. So they're the ones that are in the position to actually then do something to protect the public. Back to Dan.
Not much more dangerous than the flu. Nevertheless, President Trump did implement that travel restriction on January 31st, even though things like the World Health Organization were saying no need to limit trade and movement, and they largely criticized President Trump's travel restrictions. Same day, January 31st, that Nancy Pelosi proposed the No Ban Act, which would actually stop President Trump from implementing the life-saving travel.
Jump back in here. So he talks about the WHO saying no need to restrict travel and trade. They did say that, but he fails to mention that they also said countries should act accordance with the evidence they have at hand. So we've already went through that. We've had that our government and senators and intelligence committees had evidence at hand that they did not use to put proper precautions in place. Second, he talks about Pelosi proposing a bill about a travel ban being introduced. That's actually not true. She did not introduce it on January 31st. It was a bill that had been introduced a year later by another member. Or a year previous by another member. She announced that they were going to have that bill on the floor days before January 31st. And it was in relation to Trump's expanded travel ban on majority Muslim countries. It was nothing to do with coronavirus. That has nothing to do with his ban for the coronavirus. That's not what it was about. Another lie by Dan. Or these are lies by omissions. He's just leaving things out and hoping that the majority of us won't look it up. And most of us don't have the time or care to, but that's what I'm here to do for you. Back to Dan.
And let's not forget that President Trump did talk about the coronavirus in the State of the Union on February 4th. What happened to that State of the Union? That happened.
Here, if that doesn't show you the clear motivation behind this video, I don't know what will. He talks about the State of the Union and fails to even mention a direct quote from Donald Trump, but shows you a picture of Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech. We see where this is coming from, don't we? And this is Trump's direct quote from that State of the Union about coronavirus. Quote, "We are coordinating with the Chinese government and working closely together on coronavirus outbreak in China. My admin will take all necessary steps to safeguard our citizens from the threat." End quote. Talk about failing miserably. Back to Dan.
So fast forward a couple of weeks when the president actually asked Congress for supplemental funding to combat the virus, $2.5 billion. What did Nancy Pelosi do? Instead of putting that money on the House floor to be voted on, she put a bill to ban flavored tobacco. That was the priority of the Speaker of the House. You also hear a lot of criticism for Trump being overly optimistic.
Another one that he's just failing to tell you the whole story. The flavored tobacco bill was already scheduled to be on the floor the same day the Trump admin asked for funding. All while at the same time, the GOP-controlled Senate was discussing anti-abortion rights bills. Back to Dan's nonsense.
Criticism for Trump being overly optimistic. But this is what Nancy Pelosi was saying in late February, telling people to go out and enjoy themselves for the Chinese New Year.
Come to Chinatown. Here we are.
Same with Bill de Blasio in New York City. I want to be clear, I'm not blaming them either. We all have the same set of facts. Even around the world, places like Italy and Spain and Iran, their cases didn't start to spike until early March. And even they didn't lock down. Italy didn't lock down until March 10th. Spain didn't lock down until March 14th. Iran, not until April 4th. Places like Sweden didn't lock down at all.
Now, was it irresponsible for Nancy Pelosi to do what she did? Sure, it was, to say that she should go out and enjoy yourself in Chinese New Year. When do we play second fiddle and follow the lead of countries like Iran and Italy and Spain? It took them X amount of days to lock down, so we have to wait until they do that. What happened to American exceptionalism? What happened to being first, being the best?
As these countries locked down, were we just doing nothing? No, of course not. President Trump implemented travel restrictions from Europe on March 12th. And what did the media say? All of that. All of that.
So let's go through this here. He talks about the European travel ban and how the media is saying that they're going at odds with Trump's travel ban. If you read these headlines, that's not really what's happening. Coronavirus is already here. Blocking travelers won't prevent the spread. Accurate. That's just accurate. Trump's travel ban on many European countries is politically motivated, analysts say. Again, that's not saying anything about he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. They're just telling you what certain analysts are saying, that it's politically motivated. 3, Trump's coronavirus travel ban comes under criticism. It did. EU condemns Trump's travel ban from Europe as virus spreads. They did. Europe blindsided by Trump's travel restrictions, with many seeing political motive. Again, just a headline that's telling you what is actually happening. EU condemns Trump's travel ban from Europe as virus spreads. Again, they did. What is he trying to say? That they were attacking Trump specifically for this ban? They're just telling you what was going on in the public once he implemented the ban. And again, it was the same ban under China, which still let in immediate family of American citizens, green card holders, permanent residents, and didn't do anything to test or trace them once they got into the country. Back to Dan.
Widespread criticism. How could you do this? What's the point of this? Well, does this really sound like an administration that's in denial about this? Of course not. And a few days later, we implemented our own 15 days to slow the spread, which then turned into 30 more days. Okay, fine, say the critics, but what about the PPE? We were well behind. We should have had more in the national stockpile. Yeah, that's true. But USA Today did a fact check on this. As it turns out, most of our stockpile was depleted after the H1N1 virus. Okay? And the Obama administration never replenished it. That's the truth. Am I blaming them? No, not really. They don't have a crystal ball. What about
This is another instance where he's actually right. The PPE was depleted by the Obama administration and during the Ebola outbreak. And he says, no, I'm not blaming them for restocking it. They don't have a crystal ball. Okay, but this is where all the blame falls on Trump. So this is what this is what good leaders do. This is not even what a good citizen should do. When someone fails to do something and then you're in their position, when you fail to pick up their slack, that's on you. That's your fault. They're long and gone. So if they made a mistake, this is like someone litters in front of you. They throw it on the floor. They don't pick it up. You step over it and walk past it. Yes, they littered. Sure, they did. But they were long gone after the garbage was still on the floor and you let it sit there. You are to blame just as much as they are for not picking up their mistakes. And especially in a situation where you are a leader and the president of the United States. That's what good leaders do. They pick up the slack of other people. That is one of the attributes of an exceptional leader.
the testing? We were behind on that. And that's President Trump's fault, right? Well, no, not so simple. Early on, the CDC started to develop a test, but China refused to give them actual samples of the virus, so it was harder to make a test. And also, they didn't do a great job of it. Also, long-standing FDA regulations prevented our private industry from actually developing tests. The Trump administration reversed those regulations that had been around for well over a decade. This is the main point here.
He's talking about testing as if it's not Trump's fault and his admin and the country as a whole and our government and the CDC and everyone to blame who's in positions of leadership. It's April 23rd, my guy. It's April 23rd and we're still not even testing 250,000 people a day in this country. Whose fault is it for the testing? Back to his finishing segment here.
If we're going to look back in time and try to suggest that our government should have shut everything down back in February, well, where's the evidence for that? We really going to shut things down when our cases hadn't really started to increase? When it barely started to increase in places like Italy or Iran? Of course not. They didn't shut things down until way later. Do you really think that we should have lost tens of millions more of jobs and livelihoods based on almost no evidence at the time? Is that really a reasonable expectation? Is that really a reasonable accusation? No, I don't think so.
This is disgusting. The fact that you would do his bidding, Trump's bidding for him, and act as though everything you're saying here is spot on and you're not leaving out so much of the story. And a lot of what you're saying isn't even accurate. This is gross. And then the last thing he presents there is a complete false choice between shutting down the entire country, everything immediately, and doing nothing, which Trump did the entire month of February and the end of January. That's a complete false choice. What you can be doing at that time is taking better travel restriction precautions. You can be making sure you're developing a proper test and mass producing it. You can be making sure you are restocking the PPE national stockpile. You can make sure that you're calling the governors and warning them and letting them know what's coming. You can be testing people. You can not be golfing. You can not still be holding rallies. You can be getting the experts in place and assembling a team that can guide you through what is about to come your way. You can do all those things without actually shutting down the entire country. But you can shut down parts of the country, like school, for instance. This is a complete false choice that he shows you at the end, and it's more sleazy nonsense. Do better, Dan. Please do better.